Chapter 28. Noamon. Carla's journey back from Rome had been uneventful. She had drugged Dylan to ensure he would not wake until long after she had departed, and was now returning triumphantly to Glimpton Park with everything that she had been asked to retrieve, and also with the knowledge that Victor's contact was very close to breaking Professor Middleton's coded notes. Lord Norwood was in high spirits. Everything was beginning to fall into place. Although Flack and his compatriots had managed to escape into the jungle without a trace, they had not resurfaced, and he was now not only in possession of one of the fabled volumes of the Liber Veritatis, but also had the clue to finding the next one. He had spent the last few weeks since his return to Glimpton studying the volume in his possession. A light knock on his study door momentarily broke his concentration. "Enter." Carla pushed the door aside and strode through into the dimly lit room. "My lord, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, my dear. I trust you are well rested after your journey." "Very well, thank you. Have you come any closer to understanding how the book works?" "Unfortunately, unlike those Templars centuries ago, the book has yet to reveal its secrets to me. From what I can ascertain, the truth will only be revealed when the book is in the right place. The legend of the Templars' copy describes that it was in part of the Temple of Jerusalem when it revealed its text. So my conclusion is that it has to be in a house of God in order for it to be read. I have yet to test this theory. Has Victor's man deciphered Professor Middleton's notes yet?" "I believe he has. He sent me a text to say that he was in the process of emailing it, but that the contents may not be what you expected. He wouldn't say any more." "Knowing Professor Middleton as I do, that doesn't surprise me. He is a very crafty man, one who always speaks in riddles. So it may well be that it doesn't make sense straight away. Only time will tell," Lord Norwood replied as he moved over to his computer to check if the email had been received. "Ah yes, here it is. Let's see what the good Professor has been up to." As Lord Norwood began to scroll through the text, the email clearly did not make for pretty reading. Carla could tell by the way his facial expression changed that Professor Middleton's notes had displeased him greatly. "Damn that man! Damn him to hell! This is the last time he interferes in our business," he shouted before storming out of the room, leaving Carla alone in the study. His sudden outburst had taken her by surprise and piqued her curiosity. She could not resist reading what had sparked his rage. As soon as she began, she immediately understood why his lordship had had such an adverse reaction to it. The email read thus: "My lord, I've managed to decode the notes that Miss Adams sent to me. Unfortunately, I must report that the news is not good. In fact, it looks like whoever wrote this expected it to be found, and although it was written in code, it was not hard to crack. If anything, that was the intention. I would go as far as to suggest that this note was specifically designed for your attention. My lord, so sorry to have missed you, but I couldn't wait any longer. Don't worry, I've made sure the Black Dragon scroll has been moved to a safe place, well out of your reach. Hope my version makes for entertaining reading. Mustache, sincerely, Peter Middleton." The rest of the notes are pretty much gibberish. Seems like he wrote them just to waste your time. I'm sorry that I could not give you better news. Sergio. Carla could not help but admire the sheer audacity of the Professor. He was certainly bold, if not slightly foolish. She had seen what his lordship could do when provoked, something this certainly had achieved. Lord Norwood found Chamberlain in the security hut sorting out the weekly guard rota. "Ah, Chamberlain, there you are. Do your agents know the current whereabouts of Professor Middleton?" "Yes, my lord. He was tracked to Jersey. I believe he has a residence there." "Good. That man has been allowed to meddle in my affairs for far too long. It's time to put an end to his tiresome interruptions. I want you to put a team together. We're going to pay him a visit. His son cannot help him now. We leave tonight." "Very good, my lord," Chamberlain replied, as that malevolent smile gradually spread across his face. The waters of the Bay of Biscay were like a heavy writhing mass of foaming white water and deep dark troughs. The wind whistled and howled across the tempestuous seascape. The Aurora, as massive as she was, struggled to keep her heading, continuously buffeted by the huge gusts from the worst storm to rage through for over a century. Unrelenting waves crashed across her bows, almost stopping her dead in her tracks. The ship's superstructure shuddered with each fresh blow. Even though the crew had spent quite some time before the full force of the storm engulfed her, ensuring that everything on deck was lashed down securely, the best fittings available were no match for the pure awesome power of nature. They watched in disbelief as one of the life rafts was ripped clean off the stern of the ship by a wave so large that it made the ship look like an infinitesimally small speck of flotsam, feebly trying to stay together as it was tossed and turned, utterly helpless, isolated at the mercy of the vast expanse of the deep blue. The strength of the wind was so intense that whole sheets of spray were whipped up off the wave crests. There was nothing the ship could do but head deeper into the maelstrom. Better the waves crashing over her bow than over her stern, swamping her and causing her to flounder, let alone attempt to turn around. If a wave hit her side on, she and all her crew would be lost. The captain had every confidence in her, and knew that as long as they did not get too close to the land, they would be fine. They would just have to battle through and bide their time until they could make landfall. Ollie and Gaz were in their element. They loved the rough roller-coaster-like ride on the storm-ridden seas. "Here comes another one," Ollie shouted to Gaz as another powerful wave crashed over the boat. "This is epic. Bet you get some really good air off one of those." "Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to land it. You ain't no Dr. Spock," Ollie replied, referring to one of their windsurfing mates who had been nicknamed Dr. Spock after becoming the first person on the island of Minorca to master the freestyle move known as a Spock. "Like you could do better, Professor Catapult." "Well, at least I know I'd get some air." "Not really sure that's quite the same thing." Unlike the two adrenaline junkies, Rachel and Devon were both embracing a totally different set of feelings. They had not found their sea legs. With every lurch of the boat, their queasiness deepened. Experience had taught them that the sea state was far too rough to run outside and hurl over the side. The one and only time they had tried this, they had been caught by a freak wave that had left them with a horrible feeling of salt water streaming out of their nostrils and a distinct salty taste of the sea in their mouths, which, if anything, made them feel even worse. So they had to make sure that they were in dashing distance of one of the heads. Even Chris, who had done a fair bit of sailing, had to admit that the storm was testing his limits of seaworthiness. The captain announced over the intercom that the ship was about to round the Brittany Peninsula, and he expected the waters should become slightly calmer once they rounded it, and it got into the lee side, and that he expected the storm to dissipate within the next few hours. To Rachel and Devon, a few hours seemed like weeks. They felt thoroughly drained by the time the wind abated, although even then it brought them little comfort, as the sea state was still a topsy-turvy mess and would take a few more hours yet before it settled. "How are you guys holding up?" Chris inquired as he appeared from the galley with a streaming bowl of soup. Rachel was about to answer, but the wafting smell of food immediately made her feel sick, and she lurched past him, hand clapped firmly over her mouth. Alas, she didn't make it quite to the head, and she struggled desperately to hold back the vomit, which inevitably sprayed out between her tightly clenched fingers. She felt there was nothing worse than the feeling of warm, watery sick running between one's fingers, causing you to tear up, let alone that acidic aftertaste, which always seemed to leave a burning sensation in one's mouth and nose. The dusk was fast closing in as the ship finally came into the waters around Jersey. Not that the aurora was that noticeable from the shore. A dense mist had begun to settle around the port, and so her many onboard lights combined into a ghostly whitish glow through the gloom. Although the lop on the water had reduced, the port was far too full of vessels that had sought refuge from the storm to enable the aurora to dock. She therefore had to hold station to the west of Elizabeth Castle until the captain could find a suitable place to anchor. "Sorry, folks, but this is as close as the captain can go at the moment. We'll have to drop a tender over the stern and ferry you across. I'm afraid you may get a touch wet," Jack said to his newfound companions. "Not to worry. You've done us proud, Jack. We're so grateful. Without you, we'd still be stuck in Belize," James replied. "My pleasure. You've done more than enough for me. Getting those vultures off my back is very much appreciated. I wish you well for the rest of your quest. If you ever need anything, you know how to get in touch." "Thanks, Jack," Chris said, shaking him warmly by the hand. "It's been a pleasure, if a little more eventful than we'd anticipated." "Jack, can I ask a favour? Instead of landing us at the harbour, could your tender run us straight up to the beach below Nuamul? It's well positioned in the lee of the headland, so should be easy and may save a bit of time. We may get wet feet, but I think we'll be pretty wet already by the time we get there," James asked as he gave his final farewell to their host. "That makes a lot of sense. Also means we don't have to hang around here for too long. I'll let the helm know. He's not that familiar with the island, so you may have to point him in the right direction." "No problem. I grew up here, so I could find it blindfolded. But it's really difficult to miss," James said, pointing out the glow of lights on the peninsula to the west of the aurora. "Sounds like the launch is ready." Boarding the launch from the bathing platform at the stern of the ship, they were soon blasting their way across the small bay to the beach below the great house of Nuamul. The gently shelving sandy beach was perfect to allow the Rib to run her bows straight up onto the sand. Once all had disembarked, Gaznolly helped to push her out into deep enough water for the helm to reverse out and shoot back across the bay to the mothership. They stayed on shore for a while and watched the aurora gradually disappear into the gloom. A final long blast from her foghorn signalled her farewell, before the thick mist engulfed her from view. I suspect Dad was expecting us to make our way up from the harbour, so maybe a bit of a surprise for him to see us coming up from the beach, James said, as they began to wander up from the beach. Ah, this is new, he added as he spied the code lock on the beach gate. I'm presuming you don't know the code in that case, Rachel said through chattering teeth, as the cold wind swirled around her. No, but knowing my father, I reckon I can probably guess. I reckon it'll be 1309. Why's that? It's the earliest record of the family on the island from the roll of assizes. Yeah, that sounds about right for your father, Chris added with just a hint of sarcasm. James's guess turned out to be correct, and after locking the wooden gate behind them, they continued up the beach road to the manor house. They were warmly greeted by Peter Middleton, who, realising they were all rather wet and cold, ushered them into the old kitchen, where there was a roaring wood-burning stove on the go, plying them with hot cocoa and crumpets oozing with butter. Glad to see you made it in one piece. I was beginning to wonder whether you had arrived today. Such has been the ferocity of the recent storm. Well, it was a little touch and go for a while. Any news from Michael or Louis? They should arrive tomorrow. Obviously the ferry's been postponed for the last few days. I take it from your method of arrival that things didn't quite go to plan in Central America? Norwood intercepted us and took the book. Ah, that is unfortunate. But not unforeseen. At least you're all okay. He won't be able to use it yet. And I'm sure he'll be fretting over something else by now. What have you done, Father? Oh, I just removed a scroll from the Vatican for safekeeping, which he needed in order to find the next volume. Don't worry, I left him a note to say it was safe. Was that wise? He and his organisation have a habit of dishing out retributions upon those who meddle too much. They don't scare me. Moreover, they'd have to find me first. I was very careful to leave the mainland quietly. I wouldn't get too cocky, Father. We thought we were careful, and were duly punished for underestimating them. Oh, tosh, Norwood's a fool. He may be, but a dangerous one nonetheless. I would have to agree with your son's assessment. Norwood is not somebody to be taken lightly. He and his organisation have a lot of resources at their disposal, Chris interjected, knowing full well that James seldom agreed with his father, and could see that if he didn't step in, it would turn into a full-blown argument. How about you take the professor off to have a look at your research? I'm sure you two will have a lot to talk about, Chris added, trying to diffuse the situation. Yes, I'd very much like that. And I can show you the map, Devon said, as she had been eager to have the opportunity to pick the learned man's brains. She had hoped he would be able to help her make sense of the remainder of the map. Sounds like a plan. It will give the rest of us some time to sort out our supplies. Is my gear still in the same place? Well, unless you've moved it. I can't see why it shouldn't be. You wouldn't believe the amount of times he can't find things and then blames me for moving them, and it always turns up right where he last left them. So disorganised. It's a wonder he finds anything, Professor Middleton retorted. Like your studies any better? Peter Middleton chose not to answer this final jibe, and took Devon off to his study to discuss archaeological things that would have sent James to sleep. The others headed off with James to sort out some kit before turning into bed later on that night.